Picture this. You are crouched behind a marble pillar in the imperial palace of Rome, 39 AD. Incense coils through lamplight, while something colder grips the corridors. It is not a smell so much as a presence, the knowledge that one person's desire decides who laughs and who vanishes. Senators pull their togas close, not against evening air, but against whispers that travel faster than footsteps. You hear laughter that does not warm a room. It skitters across stone. Welcome back to the Hollow Throne, where we explore how power corrupts until language itself struggles to keep up. Today we enter the shadow that clings to the name Gaius Caesar, known to history as Caligula. A ruler whose private life is told to us by enemies, courtiers, and moralists, yet whose legend has shaped centuries of fear about what happens when one man answers to no one. A clear warning before we go further. Our story touches on accusations of coercion, abuse, and sacrilege. We will not describe anything graphic. We will examine what the sources say, why they said it, and what these claims reveal about Rome and about the human urge to control through intimacy. Here is the door into the story. Caligula's first months looked like sunlight after a storm. Prisoners freed, games lavish, donations generous. Then the light bent. Behind the spectacles, staff noticed patterns that felt like tests. Friends were placed opposite each other to see who would flinch. Lovers were set on stage to measure what loyalty could survive humiliation. Not spectacle for pleasure alone, but spectacle as experiment in obedience. The allegations that follow are among the darkest in imperial law. Ancient writers present a portrait not only of indulgence, but of calculated domination. Yet before we accept any one tale, we need to map the room. Our main voices are Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and Philo, with later echoes in Josephus and Tacitus. They wrote with agendas, moral frames, and audiences that expected rulers to carry the blame for society's anxiety. This does not mean the accusations are inventions. It means that Rome used stories of the bedroom to talk about the state. In Rome, intimacy was politics by other means. To approach Caligula, begin with a child in a camp of soldiers, little boots trotting between legionaries, a mascot in a world where victory and cruelty shared the same table. Add grief that came early, court life that rewarded masks, and years under Tiberius on Capri where secrets paid the rent. Out of this came a young man who learned that watching people is a form of power. Noticing what makes them proud, noticing what makes them ashamed. When he became emperor, he applied that education to the city itself. Banquets turned into laboratories of rank and fear. Invitations became tests. Whose smile was real, whose silence was prudent, which households would trade dignity to survive. The stories that horrify us are often framed as tales of appetite. Read them again as case studies in control. That is where the true chill lives. Picture this. You sit at a banquet in 38 AD. Lamps throw gold across polished tables. The emperor rises. The room quiets with the speed of a heartbeat. He begins to appraise people out loud. Not only looks, but alliances. Not only spouses, but family pride. The aim is not indulgence, it is leverage. To take what a rival treasures and place it on a stage is to display that rival's power as fiction. This is the thread that binds the most notorious allegations. The point is not the act. The point is the audience. Rome understood reputation as armor. Caligula understood reputation as a handle. If he could lift a senator by that handle and move him from honor to humiliation, then the Senate itself became a theater troupe awaiting direction. Ancient writers claim that private rooms became arenas where shame was studied like a craft. They describe an emperor who treated human bonds as materials to shape. Sister, wife, friend. Each a symbol that could be raised to sacred rank in public ritual, then pressed into obedience in private. The details vary across sources. The pattern remains the same: elevate, profane. Make the city chant divine titles, then make the same city pretend not to see what hurt behind closed doors. Whether every scene happened as told is less important than the system these scenes describe. This is how imperial terror works without armies. It enters the bloodstream of social life. Marriages become uncertain. Banquets become traps. A favor becomes a leash. The arena reflects the palace. Games that once celebrated martial skill bend toward humiliation as entertainment. Audiences who come for sport learn something darker, that they can be made to laugh at the breaking of boundaries. Rome prided itself on rule of law. Yet rumor became verdict, and silence became the safest prayer. Consider Drusilla, the sister whose name haunts every account. Some writers speak of an intimacy turned into public cult. Others see political theater and the Senate's craven need to please. Either way, the result in the sources is the same: worship that tastes like grief, ritual that feels like a command. The city is forced to cheer a family romance it does not understand while living with the fear that any hesitation can be called treason. This is why the Caligula legend endures. It is the parable of a society discovering that its most private rooms can be used to govern it. Step back and the pattern clarifies. The emperor exploits three engines of control. First, uncertainty. He changes the rules daily so that everyone must watch his face to know who they are. Second, visibility. He drags private status into public sight and makes spectators complicit. Third, sanctity. He paints his whims with divine color so that refusal looks like blasphemy. Put together, these engines turn intimacy into an instrument. They also corrode the institutions that once restrained the powerful. By the end of 38, the palace is not merely a house. It is a workshop where fear is refined. The marble corridors of the imperial palace glisten beneath the oil lamps. Incense swirls lazily in the heavy air, mingling with something colder. The silent knowledge that one man's desire decides who laughs and who vanishes. Senators walk softly, voices hushed to whispers that die before they echo. From deep within the palace comes laughter, sharp, joyless, reverberating against stone. Rome has known cruel rulers before, but never this flavor of madness, this deliberate theater of domination. The year is 39 AD, and Gaius Caesar, known to history as Caligula, has turned the empire into his private stage. Welcome back to the Hollow Throne, where we explore the corruption of power when it begins to eat itself from within. Today, we descend into the psyche of the emperor, whose name became synonymous with depravity, yet whose true terror lay not in excess, but in calculation. Before we continue, understand this. We will not dwell on the salacious, but on the psychological, the way control becomes a language, and the way fear replaces faith. At the beginning of his rule, Caligula was hailed as Rome's savior. He released prisoners, restored exiles, distributed bonuses to the troops. The city rejoiced. After years under Tiberius's paranoia, Rome thought itself reborn. But beneath the generosity lurked something colder. The young emperor had learned that kindness was the most efficient disguise for study. He watched faces, measured gratitude, calculated hesitation. The same eyes that had once scanned the battlefield for weakness now surveyed senators and servants alike. In these early months, the seeds of terror were already sown. Invitations to banquets became summons to judgment. Guests learned to speak carefully, laugh when expected, and never meet the emperor's gaze too long. A misplaced glance could become prophecy of doom. For Caligula, power was not about ruling the empire. It was about dissecting obedience. He wanted to see what people would do when every moral compass pointed toward him. To understand the monster, you must understand the child. Born amid soldiers on the German frontier, Caligula grew up surrounded by armor and death. His nickname, little boot, was affection from battle-hardened men, unaware that they were shaping a mind that would later weaponize affection itself. His father, Germanicus, was the model Roman hero, beloved by troops, adored by the people. When he died, suspicion of poison darkened the imperial house. Caligula's mother, Agrippina the Elder, became obsessed with vengeance, teaching her son that loyalty was fragile and that survival meant deception. Years later, on the island of Capri under Emperor Tiberius, the lessons deepened. The young Caligula observed cruelty dressed as ritual, manipulation disguised as governance. He learned how fear could be administered like medicine, one drop at a time until the victim accepted it as normal. When he inherited the throne at 24, Rome celebrated. The senators cheered the end of Tiberius's tyranny, not realizing they were cheering the birth of something worse, tyranny that smiled. Within months, subtle irregularities began to appear. Strange decrees, conflicting orders, servants whispering that their emperor's moods changed with the hour. Behind closed doors, he tested loyalty with games designed to strip away dignity. He would praise a man's wife at dinner, then ask to see her again privately, forcing her husband to applaud as though honored. It was not lust that drove him, but precision. Caligula was studying humiliation as an instrument. At one banquet, witnesses recall how he surveyed the women of Rome's elite like livestock at auction, describing their features with cold amusement while their families sat motionless. No one dared to protest. The entire event was less an orgy of pleasure than an experiment in obedience. Rome's political elite, once the guardians of its virtue, were reduced to actors performing submission. Ancient sources, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Philo, describe these episodes in tones of outrage, yet each writer used Caligula to express his own era's moral panic. We may never know how many of the tales were literal truth, but what is consistent is the pattern. An emperor who ruled not through violence alone, but through the systematic dismantling of pride. In this way, the palace became less a home than a laboratory. One of the darkest threads in his story concerns his sisters, Drusilla, Agrippina the Younger, and Julia Livilla. To the public, they were divine symbols of Julian beauty and virtue. To Caligula, they became instruments for his twisted theology. He raised them to godlike status, ordering Rome to worship them as celestial beings. Statues of the imperial sisters appeared beside those of Venus and Juno. Yet beneath this elevation was degradation, rituals that blurred the line between family and faith, reverence and blasphemy. Whether these ceremonies were born of delusion or deliberate spectacle, they achieved one purpose. They made the empire complicit in his private obsession. Drusilla, the sister he adored most, became the center of his invented religion. Her name was invoked in prayers, her likeness carried in processions. When she died in 38 AD, Caligula declared her a goddess and decreed national mourning. But the grief that followed was not the sorrow of a brother. It was the rage of a man who had lost control over his favorite subject of domination. He forced the Senate to grieve as he commanded, turning an entire empire into an audience for his mourning. The personal had become political theater once again. From this point, the emperor's divine identity hardened. He began to refer to himself not as ruler, but as living God. Temples were rededicated in his honor. Priests reshaped prayers to include his name alongside Jupiter's. Citizens hesitated before speaking his name aloud, unsure whether it counted as worship or treason. Rome's ancient religion, once rooted in duty and tradition, was absorbed into the cult of personality. The transformation was meticulous. Caligula's processions became architectural performances of power. He built bridges between palaces and temples so that he could walk, uninterrupted, from mortal to divine space. Each step reminded onlookers that the emperor no longer needed permission from the gods. He was the permission. Those who questioned it vanished. Those who survived learned to cheer with convincing smiles. Religion became his favorite tool because it fused awe with fear. People could rationalize cruelty, but blasphemy terrified them. To make rebellion seem sacrilegious was the highest form of control. Caligula exploited that perfectly. When he commanded worship, citizens obeyed not out of love, but out of terror of cosmic consequence. It was tyranny disguised as faith. Yet beneath the grandeur, something inside him frayed. The man who once observed others began to lose grip on his own reflection. Courtiers noted stretches of silence, followed by manic bursts of laughter. He would stare at the moon for hours, claiming to commune with the divine. Whether this was illness or theater, none could tell. But all could sense that something human had been replaced by performance entirely. Rome continued to indulge him because the alternative, defiance, was unthinkable. The Senate, stripped of dignity, transformed into a chorus of applause. Even military men who once commanded legions now stood trembling before a man half their age. To survive was to pretend belief. The empire's proud hierarchy had dissolved into ritual obedience. By 40 AD, Caligula's ambitions expanded beyond worship. He began demanding monuments that blurred architecture and theology. Architects were summoned to design a palace that mirrored the heavens, a structure of marble constellations, corridors that aligned with stars, and rooms arranged as if they were altars. It was art as self-deification. Each column, each mosaic, proclaimed that Gaius Caesar was both man and god. For citizens, the burden grew heavier. Taxes soared to fund divine construction. Temples were stripped of gold to adorn his sanctuaries. Grain shipments faltered while marble caravans arrived by the hundreds. Complaints were whispered only behind locked doors. Publicly, devotion had to sound joyful. Private despair became the empire's new silence. To demonstrate his power over nature itself, Caligula staged miracles. He ordered a bridge of boats to span the Bay of Baiae and crossed it in triumph, declaring that he had conquered Neptune. Crowds cheered, unsure if the act was satire or heresy. Either way, the emperor smiled. The illusion was the point, but illusions need belief, and belief, when forced too long, turns into resentment. Whispers of conspiracy began to circulate. The Praetorian Guard, once his loyal defenders, started to question whether divinity could bleed. Rome itself seemed to hold its breath. The city that once celebrated his rise now prayed for his absence. Every institution that might have restrained him, the Senate, the army, the priesthood, had been corrupted into tools of his ego. Yet out of that corruption, something unplanned began to form: quiet memory. Senators who had survived his humiliations began to recognize one another's pain. Guards who enforced his decrees began to dream of sleep without nightmares. The machinery of obedience was still intact, but inside it, the first gears of defiance began to turn. The empire had learned the rhythm of tyranny: spectacle, silence, spectacle again. But the rhythm was faltering. Caligula's divine theater was approaching its final act, and the audience was no longer enthralled. They were waiting for the curtain to fall. By the opening of 41 AD, the palace no longer echoed with laughter, only the sound of guarded footsteps. The emperor had withdrawn into a world of omens and whispers. Servants spoke of long nights where he roamed the halls alone, muttering to unseen companions. Messengers reported that his orders contradicted themselves by sunrise. Some claimed he was testing loyalty through confusion. Others believed he was simply lost inside his own mythology. Whatever the truth, Rome's most powerful man had become its most isolated. Outside the palace, the city moved in uneasy rhythm. The Senate performed its rituals of praise. Citizens repeated rehearsed prayers to the living God, but devotion had curdled into exhaustion. The same hands that once reached toward the emperor in celebration now trembled in fear of being noticed. In the markets, people lowered their voices when his name was spoken, as if sound itself could betray them. Even the Praetorian Guard, sworn to protect him, began to glance at one another during long watches, wondering who among them would be the first to act when the time came. Caligula's public appearances grew stranger. He ordered senators to accompany him on nocturnal marches across the city, carrying torches while he proclaimed himself both conqueror and priest. He spoke of new campaigns, one against Neptune, another against the gods of the East, but no armies were ever mustered. Instead, he staged rehearsals, mock triumphs through the streets, demanding cheers for victories that existed only in his mind. The empire watched its ruler perform a one-man theater of power and madness, unable to tell where the mask ended and the face began. His paranoia, once private, became policy. He restructured the palace into zones of surveillance. Guards reported on guards, advisors spied on one another, friends vanished overnight, replaced by flatterers too terrified to speak truth. Those who had once shared wine with him learned that every word might be repeated to his secret informers. The fear was total, yet within that fear lay the seed of resistance. Among the Praetorians, discontent hardened into purpose. Cassius Chaerea, an officer long humiliated by the emperor's mockery, became the quiet center of a growing conspiracy. He was not a politician, but a soldier, a man whose dignity had been stripped publicly and who now sought redemption in the only language soldiers understand: action. The plot began in whispers. A question here, a look there. Could divinity bleed? Could a god die like a man? Each whispered answer brought them closer to treason. Inside the palace, Caligula's reality fractured further. He spoke often of immortality, of ascending bodily to the heavens. Astrologers were commanded to calculate the date of his transformation. Sculptors began carving statues of him in forms blending man and god. When a comet appeared over Rome, he took it as a sign of his apotheosis. But to the watching city, it felt more like an omen of ending. Then came the Games of January. The emperor ordered a series of performances to celebrate what he called the renewal of Rome. Actors rehearsed tragedies that mirrored his own life. Musicians played hymns written in his honor. Every scene revolved around him, every line bent toward his name. The palace guards were exhausted from constant duty, their nerves raw from weeks without rest. Amid the forced celebration, the conspirators saw their chance. The morning of the 24th dawned cold and silent. Caligula arrived at the theater, surrounded by attendants and officers. He appeared calm, almost serene, as if sensing the performance to come. Between acts, he stepped into a narrow passageway to address a group of performers. It was there, in the confined space of the corridor, that Cassius Chaerea struck. The first blow was quick, silent, a soldier's gesture, clean and practiced. The second came with a shout, then the others followed. Years of fear and humiliation poured out in steel. The emperor fell not as a god, but as a man. Accounts say he tried to speak, perhaps to command, perhaps to plead, but the sound was lost in the frenzy. When the blades withdrew, silence filled the passage once more, an absence so profound it seemed the palace itself exhaled. For a moment, Rome was without an emperor. The conspirators turned immediately to destruction. They stormed his archives, burning records, destroying lists of names, and freeing those still held under false charges. They moved through the palace like exorcists, erasing every trace of his private cult. But what they found among the papers chilled them more than the man ever had. Plans for new temples, blueprints for expanding the machinery of worship, and decrees that would have declared every Roman citizen the emperor's property. Caligula's reign had not reached its peak. It had only been interrupted. News spread through the city before the blood dried. Some rejoiced openly, others hid, unsure who would seize power next. The Senate convened in chaos, debating whether to restore the Republic or find another emperor. In the confusion, the Praetorians discovered Claudius, Caligula's uncle, hiding behind a curtain in the palace. They lifted him onto a shield and proclaimed him emperor. The monarchy survived because no one could imagine Rome without a master. In the days that followed, the new ruler ordered the cleansing of the palace. The shrines to Caligula's divinity were dismantled. The gold melted down, the inscriptions erased. Yet no decree could erase memory. Servants who had lived under his gaze walked the halls as if expecting him to return. Senators flinched at sudden noises. The empire's wounds were not physical. They were psychological. Claudius inherited not a throne, but a trauma. His first acts were gestures of restoration, compensation for victims, pardons for the accused, and solemn promises that such tyranny would never return. But beneath those promises lay fear. Everyone knew that Rome's system, the machinery of absolute power, remained untouched. The emperor had changed, not the empire. And so the legend of Caligula began to harden into myth. Historians, moralists, playwrights, all shaped him into a symbol. Some painted him as a madman destroyed by his own delusions. Others saw him as the inevitable product of a system that bred monsters. Whatever the truth, his name became shorthand for the moment when power turned inward and devoured itself. Centuries later, travelers would walk among the ruins of his palaces and swear they could still feel the chill. The marble gleams, but the air holds something else, a memory of fear too deep to vanish entirely. Rome survived, but it never truly recovered. In the days after Caligula's death, the palace corridors felt both liberated and haunted. Guards who had marched in fear now spoke in low, uncertain tones, as if any loud word might awaken the ghost of the man they had killed. The marble walls still bore his emblems, carved lightning bolts, divine titles, fragments of prayers etched in stone. Workers chipped them away in silence. Every strike of the chisel sounded like an exorcism. Claudius, newly lifted to the throne, moved cautiously through this landscape of dread. He understood that Rome's trauma could not be healed by decrees alone. So he set about re-establishing routine. Courts reopened, festivals resumed, markets filled again with chatter. The machinery of empire groaned back to motion. Yet beneath the surface, people still measured their words, glancing toward the palace as though expecting the nightmare to return. The Senate, once paralyzed by terror, rediscovered its voice, but only faintly. Senators spoke of reform and restraint, but every discussion circled the same unspoken truth. Nothing in Rome's structure prevented another Caligula. The divine titles were abolished, but the powers remained. The emperor could still command armies, appoint priests, and silence opponents. The form of tyranny had been condemned, but the substance endured. Historians who later chronicled these events faced their own dilemma. To tell the truth was to confront the system that made such men possible. To flatter the new ruler was safer. So they turned Caligula into a symbol. Suetonius wrote of madness and moral decay. Cassius Dio described omens and curses. Philo cast him as a monster beyond human redemption. Each writer reshaped him to fit the fears of his own age. In doing so, they preserved a mirror for all who came after. A reflection of how power, once unrestrained, consumes both ruler and ruled. For ordinary Romans, the memory of Caligula lived on in the smallest gestures. Parents hushed their children at night with warnings about arrogance. Soldiers remembered how quickly loyalty could turn to complicity. Even artists, those who once carved his likeness into marble, began sculpting broken statues, half-erased faces, an empire's quiet confession of guilt. The trauma became part of Roman identity, the lesson that civilization could carry grandeur and barbarity in the same breath. Over the following decades, new emperors rose promising stability, yet the shadow remained. Nero's spectacles, Domitian's paranoia, Commodus's self-worship, all bore traces of Caligula's script. They had learned from his mistakes not by rejecting them, but by refining them. Fear became subtler, performance more polished, cruelty more bureaucratic. Rome had turned trauma into tradition. What endured longest was the psychology of obedience. After Caligula, every Roman understood that survival depended on interpreting the ruler's mood. Empires learn quickly, people adapt faster. Generations grew up fluent in silence, skilled in the art of appearing loyal while dreaming of escape. The Senate learned to flatter with sincerity. The army learned to serve without belief. This was Caligula's true legacy. Not his crimes, but the habits of thought that allowed them to happen. And yet, history is not only a record of corruption. Hidden among the ruins are traces of resistance. The praetorians who struck him down acted from vengeance, but their act reminded the world that even a god-emperor could bleed. The chroniclers who preserved the story, however biased, ensured that memory outlived fear. Each retelling, each moral, each rumor kept the warning alive. Power unchecked will always find new forms of worship, and those forms will always demand sacrifice. Centuries later, when the empire itself collapsed, philosophers looked back on Caligula's reign as a turning point, a moment when Rome glimpsed its own reflection and recoiled. They wrote that his madness was not an accident, but an X-ray of imperial logic. When a society confuses obedience with virtue, it breeds rulers who mistake cruelty for order. When it confuses spectacle with truth, it invites tyranny draped in applause. Walk through modern Rome and the echoes persist. The Circus Maximus lies in ruin, but the stones remember the roar of crowds. The Palatine still catches the afternoon light on fragments of marble where once stood his palaces. Tourists pass by, cameras raised, unaware that beneath their feet lie the remnants of corridors built for control. Hallways where every whisper was measured, every heartbeat counted as evidence of loyalty. The physical empire has turned to dust, but the psychology of empire endures wherever fear and spectacle coexist. That is why the story matters. It is not merely the biography of a deranged ruler. It is a manual on how power distorts the human spirit. Caligula's Rome teaches us that tyranny rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with flattery, with citizens who surrender skepticism for comfort, with institutions that mistake proximity to power for participation in it. By the time the cruelty arrives, the defenses are already gone. So, as we close this descent into the hollow throne, remember, every generation faces its own Caligulas. They come not in togas, but in tailored suits, not in marble palaces, but on glowing screens. They thrive wherever fear is profitable and worship convenient. History does not repeat itself in form. It repeats itself in pattern. If you found today's journey through Rome's darkest corridors enlightening, subscribe to The Hollow Throne. Next week, we'll examine how Nero inherited the machinery his uncle perfected and used art itself as an instrument of control. Understanding these echoes isn't voyeurism, it's self-defense. Because civilization's survival has always depended on one fragile skill: recognizing the performance of divinity before the curtain falls.